Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, we're here today with Jonathan Pritchard. How are you?
Doing way too well, thank you.
So glad to have you here. You want to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
You got it. My name's Jonathan Pritchard. I'm the founder of the Hellstrom Group, which is an international consulting company working with BP, State Farm, United Airlines. I've traveled the world, had many adventures, and it all stemmed from getting my start as a mentalist, which is a performer who apparently can read minds, but it all stems from just applied psychology. There's no voodoo to it. So I'm a professional speaker, consultant, author, just an interesting person who's followed my curiosity my whole life. So
I
that's
like that.
that's the long story medium.
So how has that affected your relationship?
It's a double-edged sword, which in the positive means that I'm a much better communicator than the average bear. So I can communicate really well and connect and understand people. The drawback is the unreasonable expectation of genuinely being a mind reader. Well, why didn't you just know that's what I wanted you to do? Why didn't you just pick up on my insinuation? Right. So it really does set the bar for effective communication a lot higher than if people thought I was just a normal person.
So how do you have such good communication?
I very early on in my relationships, personal, business, otherwise, just tried to help them understand that I ask questions to better understand what they're thinking and then try not to punish them for being honest with me. So asking, so what do you think about this? Have them tell me. And then instead of go into debate mode or argument mode or saying, oh, I already understand what you mean with those words, I then ask follow-up questions. And then when I think I understand it, ask some more questions. And then reframe what it is that I think I understand about what it is that they've said, and then present it back to them so that I can clearly communicate just how little I understand about what it is they just said. It sounds very clunky. It sounds very long and drawn out, but it actually saves you so much time on the back end of not realizing 4 years later, oh, I didn't know that you meant that when we first were getting together. So it really pays to be that thorough with asking questions, being able to have the other person know through and through that you can handle their ideas and for them to be honest with you, because that's the only way that you'll get an accurate picture of what they're thinking and then be able to use that as a model for future behavior. So if you're operating off of misunderstanding, you won't know it until the consequences of that misunderstanding happen, and by then it's too late. So my strategy is to try to front load the conversation with questions, listen more than I talk, which is kind of difficult on a podcast. But if we were in a relationship, I would do a lot of question asking.
Yeah, and it's never making assumptions because you're always asking, so you're not assuming anything. Always want to know more, always want to understand, and it also builds the relationship because the person feels understood, the person feels heard. The connection there goes much stronger.
Right. In the human brain runs off about the same amount of electricity energy as a refrigerator light bulb. So that's not a lot of power. So we've had to learn a lot of shortcuts and just kind of, well, this works most of the time, assumptions about how the world works. So you aren't even consciously aware of all the assumptions you're making already. So when you think you don't have any assumptions, you're sorely mistaken. You're assuming that the chair isn't going to fall apart when you sit in it. You're assuming that the mouse is going to be where you left it. You're assuming that gravity still works. Many of those assumptions will be in alignment with reality, but it's one of those things you're not even aware of the things you're not aware of. So when you think you've got it all handled, relax, you understand nothing.
Yeah. How do you deal with challenges that come up? You're always asking questions, you're always understanding, but what do you do when there's a challenging situation?
I know what happens when I don't do the difficult way. The natural reaction is to get upset or frustrated and then use that emotion as justification for behavior. You made me angry, therefore I'm going to lash out. And that makes total sense because you made me so angry. Over my years, I've seen firsthand every single time I react in anger in any way, it always creates more problems for me than recognizing I'm upset right now and I need to not take action. I need to not make any choices. I'm just going to take a moment. Then after that passes, then kind of ask myself, what would the best version of me possible, what would he do in this situation? And then if I do that, I'm less likely to do something that will come back and bite me.
It takes a lot of self-awareness and self-control to actually be able to go and implement that.
And the only reason I have it is I didn't have that for a very long time.
So how
So
has your relationship changed because of it?
I would say that my relationships are better now. So I'm 37 years old and I have fewer relationships than I did when I was younger. I would say, though, that the quality of them is much higher, that there's a lot less frustration on my end, their end, that they're a lot more stable and productive and positive for everybody involved instead of just two people having trauma on themselves together. Right?
Yeah. We all have our stuff to work through, and just getting mad and not understanding other one doesn't help anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how has your knowledge for human psychology and how people work affected your marriage?
I was married when I was in my early 20s
Mm-hmm.
and then went on tour, went on the road. I was gone a lot. And part of it was that she would say, well, this isn't what I signed up for. And I was like, this is the only thing I've ever wanted since I was 6 years old. Like, I don't understand where the disconnect is. And both of us early on said there were details about our life that weren't as important as we later realized they were. And as both of us dug in and doubled down on those details, it became more and more apparent that, yeah, okay, this isn't the best dynamic for both of us. So we got divorced and went our separate ways, and I think that was the best decision for everybody involved.
So was
So
that understanding yourself, or was that understanding humans in general?
it was realizing that that quiet voice in the back of my mind from the beginning really was accurate. Like, that he knew what he was talking about, that little voice whispering, like, this is probably going to be a problem later. It's like, no, this is just right. So then learning to trust myself, and then realizing there are fewer and fewer exceptions to where truth and honesty is the best policy, right? With yourself, understanding that. And that's what made it such a double whammy was, you're right, I'm a world traveling mentalist. I use applied psychology on stage and in my own business every day, all day. How in the world could I miss it for myself? So hard, like, just totally missed the mark. So there was a lot of anger at myself and disappointment and just a whole negative spiral of, you should have known better. And after you go through that kind of intense dynamic, you know better, now you do better. So there are many fewer instances where I ignore that quiet voice inside, and consequently there are fewer situations where I regret saying yes or no or whatever the situation was.
So what was your method to heal from that and go through the process of where you are today?
As weird as it sounds, it was learning martial arts.
It's a lot.
I didn't have a regular martial arts practice before that, but I got divorced and I like to say I got married, I got fat, I got divorced, I got fatter, and I was like, this is not good for me. So I realized I need to get some sort of exercise. Tried running, didn't enjoy it. Let me try martial arts, and then at least having that discipline of all I have to do is show up to class. That's my low bar today. Just go to class. And then having the discipline to show up to a commitment I had made was the first part of being disciplined with myself and owning my commitments and actually having a practice of self-care, self-improvement, just working on being able to control myself is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, well, the way it sounds now, the way you act with your other relationships, that self-control is quite strong.
I try.
Have you always been into human development and human behavior?
I have. It's pretty much the single most interesting thing in the universe is people.
That's why I love
And
relationships, because it's two people acting together.
exactly. And I truly fundamentally believe that relationships are our most powerful force in our life. And I mean that relationship with yourself, relationship to the present moment, relationship with your problems, which you then can transform into opportunities, relationships with the resources on hand to make use of those opportunities, and then building interpersonal relationships to amplify the positive effect you could have in the world. So it's the most important thing in your life is the space between you and the other person.
Yeah, yeah. So if someone is not in a good relationship, what would you recommend them do first step to start making their relationship better?
Focus on controlling yourself and taking radical ownership for the decisions you've made up to this point. There's a tendency to try to argue about that final 1% of ownership. There's 50-50, and somebody's going to be 51, somebody's going to be 49% responsible for how awful the situation is. And then you just have this bitter argument about, well, you did that, and then, well, you did this. And you're trying to argue over that final ownership of that 1%, when really there's 200% responsibility. You are 100% responsible for your choices. They are 100% responsible for their choices. And if you can't wrap your head around that, there's nothing else you can do. So radically understanding, you know what, I have made choices that have resulted in this situation continuing. So what were those choices? Why did I make them? Why did that seem like the best choice for me to make? What beliefs do I have about life and relationships that made that the best idea? Because I now see how it's played out and I don't like it. So I need to change something about the way I think about relationships and life in order to lead to better decisions down the road. So it's every mistake you think is out there is actually in here. It's all you. You are the problem. I am my problem. Right.
Stars with yourself, exactly.
Yeah, I'm the worst opponent I will ever fight.
Or
Right?
work with, I like to say instead.
Exactly. I always like to say it's a dynamic situation. It's not a fight. It's
Yeah,
just there's a lot of things in motion. There's a lot to manage
a
and
lot of
be in
energy,
relationship with.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And figure things out. Also, as you work on yourself, even not a relationship, just as you work on
Mhm.
yourself and you change, automatically that goes and changes the relationship. So,
Right.
what advice would you give to someone who wants to have an extraordinary relationship?
That they aren't static. They aren't frozen in time. Everything is in motion all the time, even when it seems like it's at rest. So the harder you try to force it to be what it was a second ago means that you are resisting what it is right now. So the best way to make it be what it is to give it the freedom to be what it is instead of trying to force it into what you think it should be or could be.
Right. And that includes yourself, not not fighting with yourself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because as you try to push the situation away or resist what is, you are obstructing yourself from being able to engage with the dynamic. So the only way you could make any difference is to actually embrace the situation and step into the dynamic instead of away from it. So less resistance, more embracing, and you will have infinitely more ability to influence the dynamic in a positive way.
Yeah, because when you're resisting it, it's not like you're really pushing it out of your life. What you're doing is you're giving it negative energy, which doesn't help you anything. When you embrace it and you put positive energy and able to work through it, then you could
Exactly.
actually solve it. Yeah. Awesome.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you so much. Awesome
Yeah,
having you.
my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment below so I can know what you think. And to book your relationship photo shoot, CJE session, or just to hear more about what we do, go to lifepicksrelationships.as.me. I'm waiting.